For millions, they were America's favorite father and son, a wholesome picture of life in Mayberry that somehow defined a generation. The gentle wisdom of Sheriff Andy Taylor and the wide-eyed curiosity of his son, Opie, became a bedrock of television, a comforting vision of community and family that just felt real. Their bond on screen was the absolute heart of the show, a relationship so believable it blurred the lines between fiction and reality, making audiences feel like they were part of the Taylor family. For 8 seasons, we all watched them navigate life's little lessons, from keeping a promise to the sting of a first crush, all under the loving eye of a small-town sheriff who was basically America's dad. But for Ron Howard, the man he called Andy was so much more than a co-star. He was a mentor, a teacher, and a private guide through the often treacherous world of Hollywood. Now, after years of quiet respect, Ron Howard is finally sharing the stories of the man who shaped his entire life. And it goes deeper than you might think. It's a story that moves beyond the fishing hole and into the private moments of creative struggle, profound mentorship, and a bond that would quietly change the course of modern filmmaking. This is what really happened when the camera stopped rolling. A look at the real Andy Griffith through the eyes of the boy he helped raise. To really get the weight of Ron Howard's stories, you have to remember the world that Andy Griffith built. When The Andy Griffith Show premiered in 1960, it wasn't just another sitcom, it was a cultural moment. In an era of Cold War anxiety and growing social unrest, the town of Mayberry felt like a sanctuary. It was a place where the biggest crime was a farmer selling produce without a license, and where the sheriff's best weapon was just plain common sense. Andy Taylor, as played by Griffith, wasn't the goofy, bumbling sitcom dad you saw on other channels. He was a widower, raising his son with a quiet strength and a deep sense of fairness. He was the town's moral compass, but he never preached. His wisdom was delivered with a southern drawl and a humble smile, usually while whittling on his porch, or teaching his son, Opie, how to skip a stone. And then there was Opie, played by a freckle-faced 6-year-old Ronnie Howard. Opie was the show's heart. Through his eyes, we all experienced the ups and downs of being a kid. When Opie learned a lesson, so did America. That iconic opening, with Andy and Opie walking to the fishing hole, wasn't just a credit sequence, it was a promise. It promised 30 minutes of gentle humor, relatable problems, and an ending that left you feeling a little better about the world. The chemistry between Andy and Opie was the show's anchor. It felt real, grounded, and deeply loving. But what none of us knew at the time was that this legendary on-screen relationship was almost something completely different. Originally, Opie was written like most sitcom kids of the time, a little precocious, a bit of a wisecracker, and always getting one over on the adults. It was a proven formula, but it wouldn't have created the show we remember. One pivotal behind-the-scenes conversation changed everything, setting the stage not just for a classic TV show, but for a lifelong mentorship that started with a simple, revolutionary idea. The public saw a perfect father-son duo, but the truth of how it was created was a private story. A secret collaboration between Andy Griffith and Ron Howard's own father, Rance. Imagine being 5 years old and walking onto a bustling Hollywood set in the 1960s. It was an adult's world, filled with technical jargon, tight schedules, and the immense pressure of network TV. It would be overwhelming for any kid. But from day one, Andy Griffith created a different kind of vibe. Ron has recalled that Griffith never treated him like a prop or just some child actor. He treated him like a collaborator, a fellow performer. That instant connection was huge. But the defining moment of their early relationship, the one that would shape their entire on-screen dynamic, came from Ron's own father, Rance Howard. Rance, an actor himself, noticed something in the first few scripts. He saw that Opie was being written as a typical sitcom kid who was smarter than his dad and always had a punchline. Years later, Ron Howard would get the full story from Griffith himself. During a reunion special, Andy pulled him aside and told him about the conversation that changed the show's DNA. Rance Howard had quietly gone to Griffith and said something like, "You're writing Opie like most sitcom kids. They're wise-asses and smarter than the dad." Then he offered a simple but profound suggestion. Ronnie can do that. But what if Opie actually respected his dad? This was a major turning point. Griffith, as the star and creative force, could have easily dismissed the note from a young actor's father. Instead, he saw the simple genius in it. He knew that a relationship built on respect, instead of cheap laughs, would have more heart and last longer. Looking back, Howard has guessed at his father's motives, believing it was partly to keep him from picking up bad acting habits, but also something deeper. He said, "I think he was, in his own very simple way, actually teaching me actor's studio stuff. It was the simplest version of method acting, finding the truth in moments." Griffith's decision to take that note was an act of incredible foresight and humility. He chose character over cliché, and that choice transformed Andy and Opie from a standard sitcom duo into a believable father and son. It also built a foundation of sincerity that let their off-screen bond blossom. On set, this translated into an atmosphere of pure respect. Griffith would take time to explain scenes to young Ron, breaking down motivations and the rhythm of the comedy. He'd tell jokes and stories to keep the mood light, turning the long hours of filming into an adventure instead of a chore. The set became a second home, a place where a kid's curiosity was encouraged, not just tolerated. Other cast and crew saw how Griffith went out of his way to nurture the young actor, creating a safe space for him to learn and grow. This wasn't just about making a TV show anymore. It was about shaping a young life. Those 8 years Ron Howard spent on The Andy Griffith Show weren't just a job. They were an apprenticeship. The Mayberry set was his classroom, and Andy Griffith was his main teacher. The lessons went way beyond hitting his marks or remembering lines. Griffith was teaching Howard how to be a professional, an artist, and a storyteller, often without him even realizing it. One of the biggest lessons was in comedy itself. Griffith had a very specific philosophy. He hated broad, slapstick humor that made characters look stupid. He would often say, "I don't want the public to laugh at us. I want them to laugh with us." Howard saw this in action constantly. He watched Griffith and the writers kill jokes that, while maybe funny on paper, would undermine a character's integrity. Griffith was fiercely protective of the show's truthfulness, believing the humor should come from the recognizable humanity of the people in Mayberry. This commitment to character-driven comedy became a core part of Howard's own directing style decades later. Griffith also created an incredibly collaborative environment, which was rare for that era. He believed good ideas could come from anywhere, even from the youngest person on set. Howard has told a now famous story about a moment that empowered him for life. He was just 7 years old when, during a rehearsal, he felt a line of dialogue just wasn't something a kid would really say. He hesitated, then spoke up, offering his own version. The director, Bob Sweeney, and Andy both listened, and they agreed his version was better. As Howard stood there, beaming with pride, Griffith noticed his grin from across the set and called out, "What you grinning at, youngin'?" Howard replied, "It was the first idea of mine they'd ever said yes to." Without missing a beat, Griffith shot back with a line that was both a gentle ribbing and a profound validation. "It was the first idea that was any damn good. Now let's do the scene." In that one moment, Griffith taught him that his voice mattered, and that good work was the only thing that counted on his set. The mentorship even extended to the boring parts of filming. When Griffith sensed Ron was getting restless, he'd engage him with games or jokes, teaching him that patience is part of the creative process. When Ron was nervous about performing in front of a live audience for a special episode, Andy pulled him aside. He didn't just say, "You'll be fine." He shared a personal story about his own stage fright early in his career, telling Ron, "It's okay to be nervous. It means you care about what you're doing." This wasn't a star talking to a child actor. It was a mentor sharing his own vulnerability to build up someone else's strength. But maybe the most important part of Griffith's mentorship was how he encouraged Howard's growing curiosity about what was happening behind the camera. Even as a boy, Ron was fascinated with the whole process. Instead of shooing him away, Griffith nurtured that interest, telling him, "Don't just be in front of the camera, Ron. Learn what makes the camera work." That wasn't just a passing comment, it was permission. It was Griffith planting a seed, giving the young actor the confidence to see a future for himself beyond acting. That curiosity, fostered by Griffith, was the true beginning of Ron Howard's legendary directing career. For all the warmth and laughter on set, the man at the center of it all was far more complex than the easygoing sheriff he played. Andy Griffith was not Andy Taylor. He was a deeply committed, sometimes intense artist who carried the weight of the show on his shoulders. One of Griffith's biggest private frustrations was how critics saw the show. While it was a massive hit, always in the top 10, the media often dismissed it as simple, unsophisticated country fare. Howard vividly remembers Griffith's annoyance with this. At one point, he openly fumed, "How long do we have to be in the top 10 for them to understand why this show works?" before reading a bad Variety review out loud to the cast. This wasn't ego. It was the frustration of a craftsman who knew he was creating something truthful and nuanced, only to see it overlooked. That intensity could sometimes be misunderstood. Over the years, there have been whispers of Griffith being difficult or crotchety. Some accounts describe a man who demanded absolute professionalism. You showed up on time, and you knew your lines. There's even a story of him punching a wall at home in a moment of anger, which resulted in a bandaged hand that had to be written into the show. But Howard's perspective adds crucial context. What some saw as a short temper, Howard saw as a fierce commitment to excellence. Griffith led by example, proving a set could be fun-loving and intensely professional. They played pranks and laughed until they cried, but they also shot 12 pages of script a day, a grueling pace kept up through pure focus. Griffith's toughness was really just a reflection of his respect for the work and for the audience. Their relationship also had to change as Ron Howard grew up. He wasn't Ronnie forever. When he moved on to Happy Days and started directing, their dynamic shifted from mentor and child to one between peers. They remained lifelong friends, with Griffith's daughter Dixie confirming that her father loved Ron very, very much, and that they shared a deep and abiding respect. Yet Griffith himself offered a telling insight into their bond. He once said, "Ronnie never considered me a father figure. He considered me his friend." This wasn't a denial of their closeness, but a reflection of the mutual respect that defined their relationship from the very start. In their final conversations, as Griffith's health declined, the nature of their bond came into full focus. Howard made it a point to visit, and their talks turned from show business to life, family, and legacy. In those last meetings, Griffith told Howard how proud he was of the man and filmmaker he had become. It was the ultimate validation from the man who had started it all. The public saw the simple, perfect father. Ron Howard knew the real man, a passionate, complex, sometimes frustrated but deeply dedicated artist who demanded the best from everyone, all in service of a story he believed in. The impact of Andy Griffith on Ron Howard's life isn't just a collection of fond memories. It's a visible legacy you can trace directly from the black and white set of Mayberry to the Academy Awards stage. Every lesson Howard learned as a kid, about character, collaboration, and craft, became a pillar of his own celebrated directing career. Griffith's most profound influence was his obsession with truthfulness. He taught Howard that stories, whether funny or serious, have to be grounded in real human emotion. You can see that exact principle in almost every movie Howard has ever made. Think about Apollo 13 Wows. It's a technical spectacle, sure, but its power comes from the genuine story of astronauts and their families facing a crisis. The focus is on the quiet, tense moments of problem-solving and human resilience, a direct echo of the work ethic Howard saw on the Griffith Show set, or look at A Beautiful Mind. It's a film about a complex genius, but at its heart, it's a story about one man's struggle and the love that supports him. Howard's direction prioritizes the emotional truth of his characters, a clear inheritance from Griffith's philosophy of rejecting cheap gags for real authenticity. The collaborative, respectful environment Griffith created also became Howard's template for running a film set. Howard is known in Hollywood as one of the kindest and most collaborative directors, a reputation built on the example Griffith set. The man who made a 7-year-old feel like his ideas mattered grew into the director who created sets where everyone felt valued. He learned from Andy that hard work and fun weren't opposites, but could go hand in hand. The path from actor to director was also paved by Griffith. It was Andy who encouraged Ron's curiosity about filmmaking, telling him to learn how it all comes together. This was the push that gave Howard the confidence to try a different path. When he directed his first movie, Grand Theft Auto, in 1977, he was young, but he felt prepared. He carried with him the wisdom Andy had shared, that directing is about vision, but it's also about leadership. After Griffith passed away in 2012, Howard summarized his mentor's impact perfectly. His love of creating, the joy he took in it, whether it was drama or comedy or his music, was inspiring to grow up around. The spirit he created on the set of The Andy Griffith Show was joyful and professional all at once. That spirit is Griffith's true legacy. It lives on not just in reruns of a beloved show, but in the very fabric of the films made by the boy, who once played his son. When you look back at Ron Howard and Andy Griffith, you're seeing more than just Hollywood history. You're seeing a powerful testament to mentorship, a quiet story of guidance and respect that unfolded behind one of television's most famous facades. The world fell in love with Andy and Opie, a perfect portrait of a father and son. But the real story, the one that truly matters, is of the man who took a young boy under his wing and just by being himself taught him everything he needed to know. Andy Griffith wasn't just a boss or a co-star. He was a protector, a teacher, and a lifelong friend. He created an environment where a child could not only work, but thrive. He showed that you could be a leader without being a tyrant, and that real art lies in telling the truth, even in a 30-minute sitcom. He taught Ron Howard about comedy and character, but more than that, he taught him about respect, for the audience, for the work, and for the people who help you create it. In his later reflections, Howard often mentioned a simple phrase Griffith used to end his shows: "I appreciate it, and good night." Howard realized that for Andy, these weren't just words. He meant it. He valued that connection with his audience, a lesson in humility and gratitude that Howard has carried with him his entire life. The image of the sheriff and his son walking to the fishing hole is an unforgettable piece of American culture. But the truer, more lasting image is that of a 7-year-old boy grinning because his idea was finally heard, and the star of the show grinning back, knowing he was helping to build not just a classic scene, but a future. The greatest role Andy Griffith ever played might not have been Sheriff Andy Taylor. It might have been the quiet, off-screen role of mentor to Ron Howard, a performance that shaped a life and left an immeasurable mark on cinema itself. The relationship between Andy and Ron was one of the most special in Hollywood history. What are your favorite memories of the Andy Griffith Show? What did their on-screen bond mean to you? Share your thoughts and memories in the comments below. And for more untold stories from behind the silver screen, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.